Okay, so everybody, you've come today. I know we're taking your lunch, so I'm going to make sure that we deliver value to you. The topic that we actually brought up with some of Greg's guidance and Dynatrace guidance is what gives myself confidence for using Dynatrace and production of our customers, right? So what I'm going to share today, we're going to start with what you know about APMs and how you use them. You're going to say, hey, yeah, this is how I use it. We're then going to move into the things you don't use your APM for that Benchmark's really great at, being a premier partner of Dynatrace. We also do some wickedly interesting things that would extend the capabilities of your APM into non-production, into QA, all different types of use cases. I'm going to actually show you them in our Dynatrace instance as well. And maybe I'll jump into Jenkins just to show you how they come together, a development focus as well as an AI ops focus from an APM. I also have, as if you're not aware, Russell Wilkinson, the Dynatrace partner engineering lead, who will also take over when I snap the gauntlet fingers. Let's jump in. Let me know if my screen is also clear. Okay, so just as I talk to, interrupt me anytime. I'm not going to go through too much of the agenda. I just wanted to let you know what's coming. So from a questions and answer perspective, just post it into the chat. Someone from our team can just let me know there's a question and I'll answer it as someone just alerts me. So I'm going to show you the Dynatrace use cases, SRE and DevOps use cases. I'm going to show you one of our apps that will very much highlight why we built a different Dynatrace APM practice, which is based on, less known use cases. And we are writing a white paper with Russell and Dynatrace specifically articulating why these use cases are just as important as incident management, which is the most common use case today. And then I'm going to hand over to Dynatrace to let you know what they're doing now, where they're going, what they're going to offer you, just what you're using Dynatrace for. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm going to do it just from showing you how this flows. You got apps, infrastructure, maybe Kubernetes as well, and you have observability. You're targeting, one dashboard for observability. You're trying to get resilience in your systems to reduce or manage MTTR. Dynatrace is identifying, or any APM is identifying issues in production. And then at that point, what's going to happen is the issue type matches a SME. It might use something like PagerDuty or Splunk on call and escalate to someone. This is the normal and most common use case of an APM, and it's production focused. So what you'll notice is the incident is highlighted as production, but what we'll articulate later is there's other use cases that are highly valuable that will be potentially in non-production. So I'm going to apply the common APM use case and change it to Dynatrace, which is also why I get confidence in using Dynatrace. So you'll notice I highlighted in yellow the differences. And we've noticed this because we have different APMs that we work with, and sometimes it's to migrate them to Dynatrace. The context is, how do I use Dynatrace differently so that my operating model functions versus using the same one I had? I'm not going to call out any other vendors, but in this case, you'll see the distinction of alerting on issues or issue prevention because it's predictive. Okay, so there's a key distinction between I impacted my customer and should look at this versus I haven't impacted my customer, but something bad is about to happen. Let's try to prevent this before it hurts you because I set thresholds to make sure I know before things get bad. So it's using the Davis AI to help you to build those patterns and try to prevent the need for an MTTR event. Another couple of things that I think most people are not aware of is Davis does your triage. So when we have clients that ask us, it's very important for me to figure out how to search through the logs, search through the metrics, my response is you will go to the problem. Davis will show you what you need to see. You can drill down from the filter, but it's already filtered for you based on the incident, and it tells you what the cause is. So triage becomes done by someone else. You consume the triage and agree with it or not agree with it. I'll show a little about context-aware risk rating, what that is, because it helps you identify which vulnerabilities that come into environments need to be remediated with priority, or ones that don't and can be ignored. And then log 2.0, most people may not be aware that in September of 2021, Dynatrace revamped their logging so that logging and analytics are all in one platform. Now I'm going to go into where we play differently, and I'll play this all out. So the way I'm going to show you in the demos is using Dynatrace for QA use cases, using Dynatrace for performance use cases, using Dynatrace for non-production confidence. Meaning when I go to production, I'm going to prevent an outage because I've been running Dynatrace in non-production, giving me confidence of all those tasks that need to be measured. So builds, when I do builds, I should be able to use Dynatrace to compare my build performance. Test cases for functional testing, load generators and evaluating performance, deploying load generators and then making sure that Dynatrace validates it. These are really different use cases. I'm using the APM or the capabilities of the APM and the logs to validate all my QA cycles, all my performance and testing cycles, and I still have the incident management items, which target generally production, but I have non-production items that actually give me confidence so that when it goes to production, I'm not going to have the issues that I keep having when I do my releases. So again, not a common use case. Most people don't use Dynatrace in non-prod. I'm going to give you some data, which is very important. We do a lot of assessments before we do implementations. And what we found was we segmented SDLC stages based upon human effort. Okay, so I have metrics of human effort. We found that one segment in the SDLC causes 70% of the human effort across every single software that's released into environments. And then if you take that segment and what it's used for and apply it across all stages, it accumulates 75% of all the things that waste our time and piss us off. If anybody can guess what it was, I might have mentioned it before. It's QA. Okay, so the reason we built the use cases for Dynatrace is 75% of everything that we measure within the SDLC of human effort is measurement-related tasks, because humans are terrible at sifting through logs and metrics. It takes us a long time to go through 10,000 lines to evaluate if any of those lines are bad or not, but APMs are really good at it. Dynatrace is really good at it. So if we're going to use this in non-production for QA needs, and I'm going to do a really good job of my incident management in production, just recognize that an APM is not a production-only tool, and that 75% of the time spent in all these releases and all these environments are specifically solved using an APM and its native capabilities. This is just a pie chart of a client that we ran. The orchestration necessity, which is human effort, is highlighted here in red. It's quality assurance. Notice the size of that pie. This is a norm. We're just not recognizing it, and technology is leaving people behind, and DevOps is leaving QA behind. Maybe we can call it QA, what do you call it? AI QA instead of AI ops. So we need to figure out how to bring QA into the CI/CD process. So what I want when I do all of these processes and use an APM, look, APM in production does a good job of incident management. It gets the right people engaged and we restore. But if I want confidence for production, I need metrics for my releases that are validated quickly and effectively so that I don't put bad things into production. It's not logical to manage production when you don't know what you're putting into it is going to be good or bad. So I'm just highlighting one of the outcomes that Benchmark does. We can do on-demand environments, ephemeral environments as well, meaning so you can save costs and operating, but we're focusing specifically on confidence for production. I'm actually going to jump out of the slides here because I'm highlighting to you a Jenkins job, and I want to actually show you it live. So I'm going to pull out here, and I'm going to come back into here. This is actually Jenkins, but a Blue Ocean extension because it's prettier for a presentation. But you can see here that it's Jenkins. If I have a pipeline, everybody has pipelines, Jenkins being the most common. If I go to Dynatrace and I create a performance signature, and I have the ability to deploy a profile of load or any functional test, I can tell Dynatrace that here's my specs, here's the performance signature. I want you to tell me if it's healthy or not, and use Dynatrace natively to evaluate performance, functional, logging metrics for me within context. So I'm actually going to show you what that looks like in Dynatrace. Here's the pipeline. You see Dynatrace, you can see here DevOps. Here's the actual Jenkins job that's running. So Dynatrace knows I'm running a Jenkins job. It also knows that I'm running a performance signature tied to that Jenkins job, and it's evaluating the time period of the performance run, which was technically 2 minutes. It's rounding it down, and it will tell me natively from logs and metrics, is my performance and unit testing healthy? You just solved 75% of all the problems we have within the SDLC natively in Dynatrace by using capabilities that people don't know exist. And if it fails, it'll tell you. Dynatrace will say it's outside the thresholds. I think right here. So let's go back to Jenkins. Severe incident, spec file threshold violations, right? Jenkins knows it's violated. Dynatrace over here, you can open in Dynatrace, which I pre-opened just to save time. Dynatrace is telling you things aren't healthy, and you can go directly from the Jenkins job into Dynatrace for the performance visualization and results. So you know why the job and release failed. No one needs to analyze it. No one needs to validate it. Yes, I need to close my door. This is the QA cycles of Dynatrace. So I'm going to switch back into the slides because I actually want to show you context over risk rating. This is one of the most important additional competencies that was added to Dynatrace is actually have it live as well. If I have an artifact that Dynatrace sees in Pure Paths, and Pure Paths, as you're aware of, maps out all the things that connect to each other, they've added SNCC or SNCC, whichever country and how you pronounce it, so that you can know the risk rating based on context. So in this case, in this example from the UI, if I'm publicly exposing log4j or an RCE, like a remote code execution vulnerability, in itself, it's not risk. Log4j in a dev environment that has no connectivity outside, I don't care. If it's exposed to the internet and it has public access, that changes the level of risk. So you can see 8.6 because it's exposed to the internet. But if you come to ours, which I believe is over here, I'm 7.5 because I don't expose mine to the internet, which changes it from a critical to a high. So in our environment, I have the same RCE, but I'm not exposing it to, there's no exploit available. Vulnerabilities have to have exploits. Context-aware risk rating is a new Gartner quadrant. Dynatrace is one of the only providers in the world to do so. This tells you what you should focus on when bad 0 days happen. So I just wanted to give context to that additional unknown use case within Dynatrace. Okay, so from our side, we see Dynatrace from incident and change management. We see it also from QA automation, testing as code, automated performance testing capabilities, QA validation and verification, which resolves 75% of what we find to be SDLC challenges. And then from us, we already have all the Git repos to help you use Terraform to deploy Dynatrace, to help you orchestrate JMeter, Gatling, whatever, or a Micro Focus Load Runner, whatever you use that you need to instrument your systems to get QA completed. It's not just Dynatrace. You still need to create, load, and automate unit tests. I'm going to show you the accelerator that gave us this direction to create this capability. This is the tool that we use, or not a tool, I would say it's an application we developed that helps organizations realize where effort needs to be placed to reduce the amount of effort extended every time you release. You'll note this one again, quality assurance in this client as well was quite large, not as large as the other, but it's above 75%. It helps us identify, is it testing that's causing the issue? Is there an SDLC stage that doesn't have automation? And because of those findings, we developed a keen partnership with Dynatrace to help organizations not only do incident management and SRE operating models, but also enable QA automation because it's damn good at sifting through logs. I'm going to stop here. No one interrupted me with questions, so I'm assuming I was pretty clear. But if anybody has questions now and wants to take an opportunity before I hand over to Russell, any questions that anybody has?
I think I'll just make a statement, Shlomo. The fact that, I think a good summary of what you said is about user adoption. So anybody can buy a piece of software. A lot of people have APM deployed into production. The idea is to get more out of your investment. The idea is to increase the use cases. You've talked a lot about deploying it into pre-prod. I think it's important to lean on a systems integrator that can help you deploy and realize more use cases with the investment that you have. So I think we are extending the full capabilities of Dynatrace within our customer environment. So production, pre-prod, you brought some security use cases, and there's a lot that you can do with the dollar that you spend. So it was a great pitch.
Thank you. All right, I'll stop sharing so I don't have to click for Russell because he'll have to keep telling me to switch slides. So over to you, sir.
And you're on mute, Russell.
The manual mute button over there. Thanks. I appreciate that. So obviously I don't know how to run a microphone, but I do know how to run Dynatrace. I'm much better with that than the other. Nice. But welcome everybody. Thank you for taking your time to join us today. I want to kind of step back real quick and talk about APM and then some of the functional use cases, the business objectives we're achieving with that platform with the help of Benchmark and our joint customers. Real quick about Dynatrace, I don't like to spend a lot of time on marketing. A couple of things I want to point out on this slide because I'm a technology person. I am an engineer at core. Of course, we can talk Gartner and all the other things. We'll bring Donna on and Troy and they can address that. What I like to address here is one on the customers and then two on the major releases per year. The customer names aren't necessarily important. I can talk about success stories around there, but the point on the customer side is customers come to us for more than just APM. They come to us for various reasons. For example, Kroger down here in Ohio is a huge DevOps shop, and they specifically went for our platform because it helped do exactly what Shlomo was talking about, which is removing the human intervention in the testing process of their DevOps lifecycle for software development. When it comes to like Royal Caribbean, for example, or Air Canada, it's not just about measuring the application performance, but about the human performance as well. What's the performance time of like delivering a drink to a Crown and Anchor member on Royal Caribbean, for example? So there's all sorts of, and the white paper that Shlomo and I will be writing talks about those additional use cases above and beyond just APM. Secondly, the other thing I want to concentrate on here is the 25 major releases per year. We excel so well in that DevOps space that Shlomo was mentioning because we are a DevOps shop first and foremost. We release thousands of updates a day, our developers do, into various pipelines, various stages that they're responsible for the components they're responsible for. And Dynatrace is fundamental in quality gating that. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit, bring some terminology back, some definitions around that. But we quality gate that so that we can now release software updates every 2 weeks like clockwork. If you're curious, wait a second, there's 52 weeks a year. That should be 26 releases per year. We do give off the end of holiday season in Canada, Boxing Day, Christmas here in the States, or whatever your end of year festivities happen to be. But that results in a significant advantage over our competitors that we're constantly innovating and delivering new capabilities, better software, faster to market. Speaking of which, let's talk about and step back and say why we do what we do and what really drives our development and where we're focusing at. In this situation, what we saw with our old platform, our old AppMon platform, our classic APM solution, was that the modern cloud wall or the complexity that came with the modern cloud was going to prevent us from scaling and being able to monitor and observe technologies that hadn't been developed yet that are now just part of the normal everyday development lifecycle and everyday application architecture. So very early on, it was very easy. You had monolithic applications and mainframes. You had individual apps that you kind of lifted and shifted into the cloud. Really, that didn't fundamentally change anything we were doing from a observability perspective. But then as we started migrating into dynamic multi-cloud environments, started going to microservices-based approaches, when we really started refactoring our applications and building them cross-cloud, that provided a level of complexity that traditional tool sets couldn't address. And the reason is that traditionally we looked at observability or monitoring from two different perspectives. Either there was your standard best of breed tools that gave you statistics around individual silos. Ex-VMware guy, spent 9 years there. I loved my vCenter statistics because it helped me reduce my mean time to innocence when I was in 2 o'clock in the morning war rooms and pointing the finger to our brothers inside of other silos, whether that was storage or networking or even possibly the compute layer. But they were all using their tools to prove that they were not the root cause. So we didn't really get anywhere other than, pointing and shouting and fights at 2 o'clock in the morning. So the industry pivoted to observability, which is, wait a second, let's bring some context in. Let's not just look at those metrics, but let's start evaluating logs in context and looking at traces and transactions that are happening. Well, when you just dump that into a data lake, what you still end up with is a lot of human capital involved in trying to discern what's really going on. So that's great. You dump the data into one place, but you're still turning around and having a massive manual effort when you try to analyze what's going on, suppress noise, and trying to identify root causes to what's happening.
You'll note that our storylines match very well there. We measure human effort and try to solve the segments, and your design and approach was based on human effort itself.
Absolutely, yeah, because we know that's the most expensive part of the situation, that human capital, and when you involve that at any point in time, you have now reduced your ability to respond to really what's going on. So what we realized is that we needed a new way. We've got to, one, provide automation. Shlomo was talking about having Terraforms to help quickly deploy Dynatrace with a given configuration across your environment. So without automation, none of this would be possible. So we need that to be fundamental to the platform. Secondly, we've got to have artificial intelligence baked in from the get-go, because without artificial intelligence, we aren't able to provide intelligent observability and provide precise root cause analysis. Ultimately, by taking these two things and bringing them in, we now have a tool set that can provide cross-team collaboration. Shlomo was talking about the developers. We touched on now the security team coming in with a new AppSec module, the application owners, the marketing team, the chief revenue officer. There's all sorts of people that are interested in the data sets that we're gathering, because ultimately what we're worried about is providing a better end user experience and understanding from a business context how things are performing.
I'll touch on this from a previous chat. When you said bringing all the metrics and telemetry together, we had a comment from a client that said, hey, I don't like how I can't lay all my logs all in front of each other so I can compare all of them together. And I was like, why would you do that? And they're like, well, that's the only way I can figure out what impacted what. And I said, well, that's not how you're going to operate now that you're moved to Dynatrace. So when I said, predictive and triage is completed for you, that also changes how you look and interact with your logs and metrics, because the triage is done. So you don't need to have 5 windows open trying to figure out how they're related to each other and which one impacted. It's all done. You click on the problem, and then everything you need regarding the problem is already curated. So we do see teams needing to adjust how they operate from a different logging aggregator or telemetry provider, or another APM. It changes behavior, so that use case no longer exists. You don't need to have panes of glass with metrics and logs to sift through. You go to what Davis said, and you look through what Davis presenting to you.
Exactly. And we call that data on glass, is another terminology for that, where you've got a huge amount of data you're sitting there staring at that you're trying to discern. Wait a second, I saw a spike over here at the same time. Basically, that's correlating data, and correlated data is of no value whatsoever. For example, for those of y'all that are interested, that are a little distracted, tired of my talking, go to spurious correlations. What you'll find is that they actually show there's a correlation between the per capita consumption of margarine against the divorce rate in Maine. So the more margarine you eat is causing more people to get divorced, if we were to just base correlated data as our engine for determining what's happening in the environment, where do we have problems, and ultimately what is root cause.
I'll give you a unique use case that we did recently, and you saw I had Jenkins integrated with Dynatrace. If Jenkins runs a performance job that's extremely high load, Dynatrace Davis will say build job 308 in Jenkins on your Dynatrace developer experience pipeline, knocked out the environment. It will specifically highlight the Jenkins job. So this is where it's not I had load. It was the job itself that ran at this time that caused that load. So that's where it's not correlation, it's the source. And we see that when you can integrate with DevOps capabilities, so that Dynatrace is giving you very key insights into someone was releasing, and in that release, they misconfigured the traces per second or transactions per second. Instead of 1,000, they did 500,000, and it blew out the environment. So those key insights save a lot of time. I just wanted to share that because it's happened in many environments where people run releases or misconfigure load, and then the environment goes down, and all you have is a mess, right? You have CPU high. Well, great. CPU isn't the cause. It was that Jenkins job itself.
Yeah, and Russell, I'll argue that COVID will beat out margarine in that study. No problem.
After everyone's been stuck at home for a couple of years, yeah, I could definitely see that. You get WeWork. I don't have a WeWork here in Memphis, so I've been making rounds by all the local coffee shops. So they're tired of seeing me pop through here and there. So, but to the comments that Shlomo was making, talking about specific, we'll get here into the how our AI ops engine works in a second, but that involves what we're really talking about there is two types of problem identification with root cause analysis. There's technical root cause analysis, which is taking and looking at these heterogeneous data sources, those metrics, logs, and traces, whether they're coming from our own one-agent driven telemetry model that we can get by deploying that out there in the environment and feeding that in, or whether we're turning around and pulling in additional from open telemetry, open tracing, StatsD, Telegraph. But it's also looking at that contextual data to say, okay, one way we use this to understand the business side of the impact of the issue, but the other part of this gives us that functional root cause analysis. So I know that, to Shlomo's point, it was an increase in this number of transactions over a certain period of time that caused a performance degradation with the service response. But why did that happen? Where did that come from? That's the functional root cause analysis. By being able to pull in this rich data set, what we're then able to bring around and provide is that, oh, it was a change control event. Specifically, what was that change control event? In this case, he was referencing a part of a Jenkins job that was running. We could tie that back to a change control event if we pull in things like, for example, the git commit. So now we know exactly what lines of code were updated, etc. So that way we have that precision that we're able to give you the information back.
From an SRE's perspective, he knows there's nothing he's supposed to do other than speak to the team and make sure that they don't do that again. So I'm just giving context. Sometimes the incident is the application failed and you seriously need to engage, or sometimes it's a mistake made during a natural event that someone was doing, and it's not the same emergency. It's not, oh, I can't fix this. It's just don't do that, what you just did, right? It's just contextual event that occurred. Just don't repeat that, fix the config of it sort of thing. So it's hard to distinguish sometimes. When you get a call at night, you're sweating because sometimes it's 4 a.m. and you didn't want to wake up. You go in, if I get that and it says it was Jenkins, I can say, okay, it's pretty simple to fix. I'll ask the team not to do that again and we'll configure it correctly. But if you don't have that context event, you're gonna try as fast as you can to figure out what's going on, even though you have no idea that this event was just an unexpected result from someone else doing their work versus the application literally has crashed and corrupted. So I think that context is very important for the people who actually are the stewards of the environments and need to maintain that SLA so you don't get sued from a contract breach. That one's the part that people don't see, is the human impact of it. During the night when you don't have context, you're the one sweating out your shirt. It would be nice if someone could tell me right away, you're sweating. Yeah, you woke up, but you could stop right now. It was just a job that someone misconfigured.
It's just because I ate a 32-ounce prime rib, ultra rare. That's the reason I woke up at 2:00 in the morning. So ultimately,
meat sweats, right? You're saying you had meat sweats?
Yeah, that's what gets me up, is the meat sweats. Definitely. That's why I'm moving more towards fish. It's not as bad on me. So ultimately, this is where we end up delivering our software intelligence platform. So yes, while APM is foundational to what we do, and it provides the extensibility of the platform into these other modules. These other modules are, as Shlomo mentioned, our latest and greatest capability we rolled out, which is application security. So this is our ability now to do a runtime vulnerability detection assessment of the actual code that's being, the modules that are running, the service entry points, the libraries that are loaded. Where are you actually having live exposure? You know, I've worked for various companies over my career. I hated nothing more than the Tuesday afternoon qualia scan of an environment. In this situation, a scan would be done of all the infrastructure in an environment, and then a report would come back from the security team back to the infrastructure team saying, oh, you have an HTTPD sitting here, a file with an HTTPD configuration for a HTTP daemon. You're not actually running the daemon, but I see the configuration for it. So therefore, you must remediate the OS on that switch and remove that. And then I, as the vendor, would have to work with the customer, understand it's not really running. There's no exploit there. There's no target there. Well, it doesn't matter. Apache was part of the base image at some point, so therefore you must remediate. In this case, this is runtime. This is looking at actually what's running. And so that way we can tell you where the real exposure happens to be and give you that threat assessment score that Shlomo touched on. And this is not just something we apply in production running environments. This now comes and extends out your DevOps pipelines or your operations into a DevSecOps capability. So now we can also turn around and, as we run through these pipelines and validate our service level objectives are being met, that also applies to the SLOs around security and the data sets that are exposed, whether that's personal identifiable information, HIPAA compliant data, PCI data. What type of data is at threat or at risk when we discovered that exploit was active in your environment?
I do see this more on the operational side versus the DevSecOps component. The reason being is when you have a war room, let's say WannaCry was the previous. Let's not talk about Log4j because everybody sent you 52 emails today. Let's talk about WannaCry. When WannaCry came up, I ran 48 hours cleaning up 60,000 devices. Which ones were important? Which ones had sensitive data? Which ones had exploits? We didn't care. The CISO came and said, all must be cleaned. And I'm like, where do you start? Everything. All that means I'm going to work my ass off. And working your ass off for a long period of time, I mean, it's manageable, but in reality, I don't know which ones were valuable or not. The part that I found the context-aware risk rating was, is this machine connected to any client or customer or external entity? Yes? Okay, priority one. If it's not, I don't care. The CISO said we'll clean it up, but I can tell them there's zero exploit. It's an isolated environment that has it. I don't need to work on that now. I can work on a regular business hours, not continuously working. Or if I have a VPN that connects me to a customer and I'm delivering the virus to them as well, or the malware or ransomware to them, yeah, I want to know about that too. That's the important pieces so that the war rooms and your long nights that keep going and going are contextual and only relate to actual business risk, not a binary. WannaCry is a ransomware event. Okay, it only becomes a ransomware event if you actually had an exploit. So context-aware risk rating, which is a new segment, very, very good operationally. The devs, not too much, outside of alert each dev who has that binary to add it to their cycle to change the binary version so it's not exploitable. But in reality, we can deal with the ones that are prioritized. Hey, dev, here's the prioritized ones we need to do. These other 52 applications, they're not exploitable, so we'll deal with it in your next release. That's nice management and empathy to your business. That's how it should be running rather than just clean it all up because everybody wants it.
Yeah, and the real world ramification of doing that is, for example, not to your point, Shlomo, I don't want to beat up the Log4Shell, Log4j, but we had to do our own assessment. And in fact, so when we popped in, within 10 minutes, I believe it was, of Snyk publishing their vulnerability or updating their vulnerability database to include that, because we monitor Dynatrace with Dynatrace, we found that one, our SaaS customers were completely protected, both from the one agent perspective as well as the SaaS clusters themselves. But our managed clusters did have one point of exposure. It wasn't a huge security risk, but it was a potential there. We had that because we were able to go back and immediately notify the developers that were responsible for that code module, that library. Within 24 hours, they had already completely remediated and patched every managed cluster around the globe instantly. As far as I'm concerned, that's instant in today's day and age when it comes to security response.
I've seen the alternative. You go to your source code, you do a search in GitHub, you find that patchy version, it says 448 copies, and then you go, okay, which ones are where and which ones are live? And then someone goes through the spreadsheet and contacts all the devs. So alternatively, you know which ones are important and which ones are not. But I'm giving you a prime example. I actually have customers today that was the circumstance. You have no choice. You're going to go through that spreadsheet and you're going to fix every single one because you don't know which ones are exploitable. You don't know which ones have high risk from a data perspective. So you got to fix it all. Highly unpleasant, and it can run for weeks. I'm sure people on this call today are still cleaning up Log4j in particular environments versus being completed within the first couple days based on which ones need to be done.
All right, guys, we've gone down the security rabbit hole, but let me talk about my Disney experience. I was on the website last night trying to book restaurants, and it crashed 400 times. I waited. It took me an hour and a half to book 2 restaurants. So how does Dynatrace help in that kind of user experience? I need to understand that to help my own life.
Absolutely. So let's talk about so one that's a fundamental use case for APM in general to identify where is this happening, who is being impacted by it, et cetera. But let's talk about it more from a business context because we ultimately want to help Disney solve their business challenge right now and be able to respond to that faster. And so, yes, it's one thing to implement APM and then, okay, now we go back and identify, but using services from Benchmark, it's about taking APM and extending it into helping automate their operations team, about helping our customers, joint customers, recover from their incidents faster, helping them simplify their monitoring complexity, and helping them innovate more and operate less. So what is this ultimately?
I'll touch on it from the perspective on the Dynatrace user interface for those who already have it. You would have your front end, and it has RUM, real-time user monitoring. You would know what browser they're using, if their experience matched other people's. So you have a front end under application and microservices, and that front end uses code-based RUM code so that you can integrate the web experience, monitor the web experience, and then if your web experience is wrong, alert, a problem on the top right will occur that a front end interaction is failing and that the experience doesn't match everybody else. So we would have highlighted Greg trying to book the specific restaurant and that user experience through Chrome. Were you using Chrome or Safari? Chrome? It was bad, and here are the actions and URIs he tried to hit that failed. Problem number 1, go and fix those microservices that they have on the back end. So that's an application level integration. Maybe they're running a Spring Boot application for their cart, whatever it was, and it would highlight that through their their RUM, real-time user monitoring.
Yep. So, for example, in this situation, like Shlomo was mentioning, Greg, coming back to your particular issue, in this case, hopefully somebody at Disney turns around, sees a problem ticket show up. And so I mentioned during the kind of the prelogue, if you will, talking about technical root cause analysis and functional root cause analysis. There's also business impact. It's understanding, to Shlomo's point, coming back and saying, okay, first of all, let's look at the application that was affected. In this case, our application is Easy Travel. In this case, it's the Disney dinner reservation application. It doesn't matter whether this is an iOS or Android native application or a web-based application. But if it's web-based, let's look at is it specific to a browser? Is it specific to a geolocation? Is it specific to an operating system? In other words, what's the scope of the issue? So that way we can identify, it's just our friends up in Canada. Sorry, we didn't like you this week and you had troubles, as opposed to it's a global issue. We identify from a business impact who was impacted by it. So now we should be able to, if we were Disney, come back and say, okay, I know there was an issue. It turns out there was 113 users at that point in time that were trying to use the application when this problem ticket was raised. Let's drill in and find those 113 users. And potentially, if we've recorded the session, let's even go back and find a session replay to understand where, Greg, were you actually having the challenge during your actual walkthrough of the application? How did it manifest itself as an issue preventing you from doing what you wanted to do?
It's because
So
they have RUM with the app, they can tell you when something's visually complete. So if your page didn't finish components, Dynatrace will know, even though maybe the session is done, that you didn't load what everybody else loads. So when you're doing the RUM within application, it'll highlight when it was visually complete, what were the load times for each of the components, and then we can find out what backend service is causing that load challenge or potential call within it.
You know, and I
exactly.
imagine when you find these kind of issues, you can go back into pre-prod and run the APM in those instances to give it the proper load and the proper context in a certain browser, in a certain time, a certain geo. Let's run those load tests in prod or in pre-prod to make sure that that doesn't happen again in the wild.
Absolutely. And that's part of the DevOps side, but you definitely want to turn around and address the issue real time and possibly even be able to automate that remediation. So we talk a lot about DevOps, but there's also the automatic ops, so AI ops. How do we handle the production running side of the house? How do we get that remediation in place as quickly as possible, then go back and fix it properly? So, for example, if we've taken this and tied it into an ITSM like ServiceNow, amongst others, but ServiceNow obviously being the 800-pound gorilla, we'll feature them in this slide deck. So where we detect that problem, we can then turn around and create not just an incident in ServiceNow, but an intelligent incident. So specifically going back to Greg's case, finding the right people, not just all of Disney IT or all of Disney's SREs or whoever, whatever the biggest group is, find the right person for that particular application and the people that support that, notify them with intelligence. And then if, like, for example, we talked about it on the DevOps umbrella, if during that change control event where the last time this incident or issue, service was updated, we can see that the owner of this code, who would have been notified via the incident, had already created a remediation script so that once we authoritatively identified this as the technical and functional root cause of the issue that was impacting your experience, we can tell ServiceNow that information, and ServiceNow makes the decision, do I have a play I can do to immediately rectify this? Then, in this case, he did using Ansible Tower, but then we go back and notify via Jira, hey, there's an ultimate issue that needs to be solved somewhere earlier in the system. We've put a fix in place, but now we need to actually fix the issue that ultimately happened in our development pipeline as well.
I'm going to reach out to Charles and tell him to fix his brittle code so I don't have a fix-it script. Band-aids are not what I want. But the comment you made before, Greg, people just skip the testing. So what's happening is because testing's so heavily laden on verification and validation, it just gets skipped unless it's a major release. But every release is major if it breaks you. It doesn't matter if it's a major or minor code change. If it breaks you, it's considered major because it affects your SLA. So if you can solve the QA cycle to be short and easy, no one's going to skip it. So when you said people will test it, highly unlikely. In most cases, when we measure that entire load generation environment almost never runs, maybe 3-4 times a year when they're releasing every few weeks.
So that's great. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yes.
That's great, Shlomo. So listen, we got about 5-10 minutes left. I want to give people a little bit of transition time before their 1 p.m. calls. So let's maybe start to wrap up and address a little bit of Q&A.
Sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I want to touch on before we jump on the Q&A was to bring some visualization from just a where does this fit from a DevOps side or a biz DevSecOps if we're going to look at it with the full scope in place, because we have that business analytics capability and the security capability. We for those of you that aren't as up to speed on DevOps, obviously we talk a lot about this pipeline that's continuous. So you build your code, you test it, you release it, you deploy it into production, then you operate it, but monitoring should be done at every step of the stage. And the reason you monitor is you want to capture, as Shlomo was mentioning, you want to capture where you have issues more quickly in the development cycle so we can address them while they're small and before they become major issues in production. And the way we help accelerate that is through quality gating, what Shlomo was referring to when he's talking about building those Jenkins pipelines, but building that test module in there and building your test parameters and defining the SLOs inside of Dynatrace directly. So that way we can turn around and look and say, hey, you said if it can meet the following performance characteristics, whether that was a business level function, a security level function, or just a pure speeds and feeds level measure, then we're going to go ahead and automatically promote the artifacts to the next stage, or we're going to stop and provide you instantaneous feedback. As a matter of fact, when we started doing this at Dynatrace, again, being a good user of our own platform, we actually had to not just do a technical change, we had to do a cultural change. So there's a technology out there called a Dynatrace UFO. So we have to visually give our cues to our developers, so that way they didn't sit there and run off and sit there at the water cooler for hours on end waiting for a test to run, because the tests are happening so fast. They want to know instantly where we turn around and start to we want to get the feedback as quickly as possible.
I've seen it changes colors. It's green and red or green and orange. I remember they change color and you can attach it to your ceiling.
Yeah, and actually you program it however you want to. You could say, I want the top part to be one stage, the bottom part to be another stage, one pattern to be one result, another pattern to be another result. They're completely programmable. But that was part of the fundamental change we had to make, was a cultural change as well as that technology change. And ultimately, this is a financial services customer, but this is routine as far as the returns that I know Benchmark is seeing out of their customers, which is a reduction from literally tens of hours down to minutes from a quality gate perspective, and getting that feedback and getting to promote the artifacts to the next stage as quickly as possible.
This actually maps the exact example we had. We had JMeter as the load, and then Dynatrace evaluating. So we have the same pipelines. A lot of customers see that JMeter, JUnit, a Micro Focus load runner, any of those, Gatling. Instrument them and have Dynatrace know you're doing it, and you'll do all the QA validation. It's not hundreds, it's thousands. So many of our customers have thousands of hours on QA. The reason is QA generally runs 1 to 2 weeks. Just so everybody aware, the average we found, QA cycles are 1 to 2 weeks. Imagine how many hours for how many people. Everybody else is waiting. So we don't even measure everybody not doing anything while QA is running. 1 to 2 weeks is totally unreasonable for an entire business to wait for QA to be done. So skip it. We're suggesting don't skip it, because in the end, you're impacting your SLA and the user experience.
Excellent.
And I was going to say, I think the QA phase is probably what brings the most human happiness back to the company, because QA is about dealing with problems, whereas people just want to be building code. So if you can relieve them from fixing more problems, everybody's happier and you retain your staff, and it solves the big human issue that everybody's having today.
Absolutely. Well, we would definitely want to take some time and open it up to Greg's point earlier. So if there's any questions you happen to have, anything you want to see on the demo side from Benchmark or on our platform as well, please, by all means, don't hesitate to let us know, and we can definitely address those questions as they come up.
Yeah, and if you don't have any live questions for us, just know that you can reach out to your Benchmark representative, and we'll get you some